Good morning, everyone. This is Greg Wadley with CTC and Associates. We are here for the final webinar of the Clear Roads project, Utilization of AVL GPS Technology. It's a case studies project. We are here with AECOM, the investigators. Let me start over. I'm sorry. Morning, this is Greg Wadley with CTC and Associates. We're here for the final webinar of the Clear Roads project, Utilization of AVL GPS Technology case studies. The investigators for this project are Ming-Shun Lee and Dan Nelson of AECOM. I just want to inform you that we will have everybody on mute today. And so if you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and enter those into the chat box. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ming and Dan.
Thank you, Greg. And again, my name is Ming-Shun Lee, and I'm glad that everybody can spend a beautiful Friday morning and before the holiday to join us on this webinar. And before we move on to the details of this presentation, first of all, I would like to thank a few individuals, the Clear Road Program and the MINDA, who administrate this project, this contract, and then the subcommittee for this project, as well as Greg Wakely and CTC that provide tremendous help and to manage this project, to help us get their input from the subcommittees and get input from different agencies around the nation and internationally too. So we would also like to thank all the survey participants. And last but not least, the 6 agencies that are involved in the case study, and those are Utah, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Washington State, and Colorado. And their lead individuals' names are on the screen. We would like to thank you, and as well as all your staff members that support us to provide the information necessary for us to complete this project. So very quickly, the outline of today's presentation. We are going to go over the project background and purpose very briefly, and then move into the process of developing this project, and then which include the literature review, survey and evaluation of the survey results, and then the case study. And the majority of time, the second half of the presentation will be focused on our key findings and recommendations. Many agencies involved in winter maintenance operations are interested in procuring or planning for future procurement of AVL systems, whether it's for new implementation or upgrade of the existing system. So the goal of this project is to conduct case studies and synthesize agencies' experience and lessons learned in planning, implementation, and utilization of AVL technology for winter maintenance. As part of this project, we produced a project final report as well as 6 case study reports. The purpose of those documents are to help other state DOTs make more informed decisions with respect to the implementation of AVL technology for winter maintenance activities. Those reports are intended to bring to light more nuanced issues related to the use of AVL technology for winter operations. They also highlight the type of issues other state DOTs and agencies should consider during the life cycle of their systems, from the initial planning stage to installation to operations and maintenance, as well as provide guidance for successful implementation of the technology. Move on to the next slide, please. There we go. Based on our initial investigation, as well as the input from this project subcommittee, and basically there are roughly 4 levels of AVL implementation, and so those are either the basic location tracking monitoring, or adding more and more type of other opportunities and integrations of the equipment on board the vehicle, as well as more sophisticated data reporting features. So those are the basic 4 levels that we kind of as a starting point to allow us to do the research. The case study focus areas include, we want to investigate how agencies are doing in those different areas, whether it's the initial planning stage involving decision making and go along with the procurement process, all the way during the implementation to provide installation, training, and then also focus, a large focus of this project is really on the data collection, management, and utilization. We want to see how different agencies go about collecting data and use the data in many different ways. And then we also touch on the operations and maintenance, as well as benefit cost, and also summarize the lessons learned from the case study agencies. So here are a list of project tasks. And so we are going to spend a little time talking about literature search, survey, our interview process, and then come up with the recommendation. So the first task, the literature review. So the research team performed a review of the key literature related to the implementation of AVL for winter maintenance operations. Our literature review focused on in the past, any publication within the past 5 years. The reason being that, a couple of years ago, especially back in July 2015, there was a clear road project, synthesis of AVL GPS equipment used for winter maintenance, that was completed around that time, which provided the main sources for the literature activity for this project. So within that report, they summarized the different equipment that have been used by various agencies, and they're also their state of implementation. So in addition to utilizing that particular report as a main source for literature review, we also expand our research to look into literature and publication, particularly from Federal Highway Administration, as well as conference paper, presentation, proceedings, and other church journals to identify and get a better understanding of how transportation agencies around the country and as well as internationally utilizing this technology and what are the particular lessons learned from implementation and using the system. And upon finishing the review, we developed a survey. The survey was developed and distributed to multiple state agencies and local agencies as well in the spring of 2017 to gather basic information from those agencies regarding their level of AVL GPS implementation, as well as the information on the planning processes, steps, and results observed from their system. So the survey was distributed via the snow and ice listserv maintained by the University of Iowa. The listserv included Curry Road member states, as well as some additional city, county, and state agencies, and which also included some international agencies. As you can see on the screen, that there are a couple of several survey topics that we focus on, kind of expanding on the previous research that the Curry did on the project 14-01, and we added more information regarding how their system is utilized, what data is captured, and some additional information as well. We received 14 responses from different agencies. Here's a map showing the agencies provide responses. Upon receiving the survey responses, we conduct an evaluation. The agencies were evaluated based on a number of factors. Key evaluation factors included the level of their AVL implementation in terms of their fleet size, as well as the number of different type of equipment integrated with the AVL system, and type and brand of the controllers they use, and also the amount of information data they collect through the AVL system, and how they utilize the AVL data to perform different tasks, such as not only the vehicle tracking, but also operational analysis, route optimization, and so on. And also gather information in terms of whether they share the data, and how do they share that internally or externally or both. And also, want to know whether they have cost information and benefit evaluation result that can share with us. And based on the evaluation, we narrowed down to 3 tiers of system implementation and put the survey responses into those 3 different categories. Level 1, or tier 1 rather, and the basic location tracking. So your system provides the basic location tracking, as well as either with or without collecting the vehicle diagnostic data. And then level 2 is more sophisticated implementation. We call median implementation. That's in addition to the function of tracking the vehicle location. They also added function in terms of data collection and equipment integration and some reporting feature. And then tier 3 is the most sophisticated implementation stage, that you integrate more equipment, you collect more data, and then you have more sophisticated reporting feature for your system. Here's a quick summary of the survey result as well as the evaluation result. And as I mentioned, the survey is a tool to allow us to identify candidates for the case studies. And due to funding constraints, we could only conduct a number of case studies. And in this case, we come up with 6 agencies for case studies. And you can see the distribution of number of agencies for each different tier, as well as the agencies we selected for tiers. Here's a glance at those 6 selected agencies for case studies and their basic characteristics of their the AVL system and the level of integration. And this a lot of information on this slide, and if it's not if you cannot read this really clearly, and this table is also included in the final project report, and which you can take a look. So obviously, we have 2 agencies in tier 2 and 3 agencies selected for the case study in tier 3. And one of the key selection criteria is not only the type of the equipment they integrated and type of data they collect and use, but also we want to identify the similarity as well as differences among those agencies. And so therefore you can see, for example, in tier 2, we have Michigan and Washington State. And Michigan utilize the Dixie-Jones spreader controllers, and versus Washington State, they utilize 5 different types of spreader controllers, or controllers from 5 different manufacturers. And so those are the kind of the differences we want to investigate to see how such differences may or may not have impact on how different agencies go about doing the planning and implementation, as well as using the output of the system. And the type of equipment and system integrated, through the survey and as well as case studies, here's a laundry list of the stuff that agencies have integrated into their AVL system. And that doesn't necessarily mean that all the agencies are integrating all of this. And certain agencies have typically you see the spreader controllers and air treatment temperature sensors, as well as probably the cloud controllers, as well as dash cam. They are typically integrated, but there are a lot of added features that the more sophisticated agencies are also integrating with their AVL system. A quick glance on what type of data they collected, and the most popular and most useful ones that based on the case studies, the material type and application rate that allow you to track the material usage, as well as the cloud position sensor that kind of help go along with the material usage, calibration, and utilization. And there are a lot of other information that agencies are collected and captured for different purposes. And once identified those 6 agencies to conduct the interviews, to conduct the case studies, the case studies is conducted through a set of in-person interviews with those agencies in order to get different factors and considerations for various stages of the system implementation. We interview the various level of agency staff and try to get their input as well as the lessons learned from the initial planning to all the way the ongoing operations and maintenance. So you can see the 4 different levels of staff that we interviewed, as well as the discussion topics that we engaged them with. And so we talked to the executive directors level to understand their planning and decision making and support process, and then down to more technical supervisor managers level to understand their day-to-day operations, as well as utilization of the data. Also interview technician and operators level to understand any issues and the lessons learned in terms of installation, as well as operations, and especially from the operator side of concerns. And also working with IT, GIS, data management folks to understand how they manage the data, utilizing the data, whether developing the software capability internally or utilize the vendor solution. And as I mentioned earlier, we after the interview and case studies were performed, we developed not only the final report, but also 6 individual case study reports to summarize and to document the case study results. In the interest of time, and we're not going to go through each individual case study in detail. Rather, we're going to provide, present our key findings and summaries and recommendations. And you can find more details in those individual documents as well as in our final report. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dan. He's going to talk about the findings and recommendations.
All right, thank you, Ming. This is Dan Nelson here, and as Ming noted, I'll cover the findings and recommendations we pulled out of through our development of the case studies as separate documents. So I'm going to advance to the first slide here, and these recommendations are all organized or arranged by the topics, key discussion topics that we had with those agencies through the course of developing those case studies. So the first slide here we have with respect to planning and decision making. The first point we have there is involving agency leadership and management throughout the project. This helps to support communicating the importance of the system to field maintenance staff and other staff that will be using that system, and also can encourage a timely installation, system maintenance over time, and proper use of the system over time as well. Identify the agency's needs, goals, and objectives for an AVL GPS system. This helps to clearly develop helps develop the system requirements and procurement documentation when you get to that stage. It also helps establish realistic expectations for staff within the agency for that project. Assess the number of vehicles within an agency fleet that will require the AVL system hardware and integration based on the needs discussed earlier in the project and the financial flexibility of the agency for that equipment. This is closely related to increasing situational awareness of winter maintenance operations. So, for example, agencies with a limited budget for AVL equipment may only need to equip specific vehicles with their fleet to have a situational awareness of their winter operations. But larger agencies that aim to equip most of or all of their winter maintenance vehicles will have a much greater awareness of their operations capabilities and an ability to report to the general public and to upper management on storm response. The fourth one we have here is conduct research and or pilot projects to gain knowledge as well as identifying issues and opportunities prior to full system implementation. Pilot testing and research helps agencies understand the AVL technology and its limitations. Experience and lessons learned from pilot projects helps to develop a better project scope and a set of system requirements when getting to that stage. And we have a best practice called out on the screen here from the Washington State DOT related to their in-house research that was performed. And the last point here we have is just considering a phased implementation to ease adoption of the technology. This may work better for agencies that would desire a large or statewide implementation and allows for an organized rollout of the technology and for outreach to districts or regions that may not be ready for the technology. That kind of outreach can help facilitate buy-in where needed and helps promote confidence in the system among those regions of the state. Recommendations with respect to procurement. The first point we have up here is under requirements and RFP development. The first recommendation we have is using a systems engineering approach in the development of system requirements and specifications. This approach typically begins with the concept of operations that involves multiple agency staff prior to developing more detailed system requirements. After that, that helps form the basis. It can help form the basis for eventual acceptance testing of the system later on. Leverage other agencies' experience and requirements in RFP development. As noted earlier, multiple DOTs have gone through a procurement of an AVL system, and these experiences and lessons learned can be valuable to others as they begin to proceed through a system planning stage, procurement, installation, and eventual operations and maintenance. So those experiences can be very valuable. Third point, clearly state an agency's expectations in the RFP. This is related to the AVL integration, say with spreader controllers and other equipment on vehicles. For example, an agency may have spreader controllers from multiple manufacturers, but desire the AVL system integration with all of those manufacturers. So this expectation, for example, should be stated within the RFP so that responders and AVL vendors can know of any potential integration challenges that might come up. And that can help to later on minimize any issues that might be discovered during the actual integration and installation process. With respect to procurement methods at the bottom here, first point we have is considering the use of a request for information process to gather information on the current state of AVL technology. This can provide an agency with a better understanding of the overall capabilities of AVL systems and also help with developing a budget estimate for the eventual deployment. Second point is using a best value procurement for selecting an AVL GPS vendor. This is more recommended for Tier 2 and Tier 3 level agencies that desire hardware integration of an AVL system with spreader controllers and other equipment on the vehicles. For less complex installations, for example, a low bid procurement method might be suitable, but it's not necessarily the best choice for more complex and or large scale implementations, given that a best value method allows the agency to evaluate more factors than just the cost of the proposal. Considering the use of a turnkey contract for complex implementation, this here refers to hiring a single vendor that would be accountable for the entire project, which can help with the integration process of multiple systems and helps reduce agency staff and resources required for management. Again, this is more useful particularly for the tier 2 and tier 3 level implementations of larger systems, so it may increase the overall cost of the project, and we actually have a best practice called out here from Michigan DOT related to the use of a turnkey contract. And the last point here I'll say is leveraging existing contracting vehicles for expedited procurement. Some states we interviewed indicated they were able to leverage existing pre-negotiated contracts either within the states or it could also be a larger multi-state contract as well. So with respect to implementation recommendations, we have a couple categories here under installation. The first point is arranging an installation schedule to minimize the impacts to winter maintenance operations. An ideal installation here would be in non-winter months to help better ensure vehicle availability. And if agency staff are used for that installation, they can better allocate their time and resources than in winter months, for example, when they might be responding to other higher priority issues with the vehicles. Install an AVL GPS equipment at protected locations with access for maintenance. This is for the hardware equipment itself for protection from liquids or tools or other equipment in the cab of the vehicle, potentially damaging that equipment. Different trucks obviously will require different mounting locations and cabling of that hardware for installation. So agencies should identify those locations for the hardware first and communicate that prior to installation. And involving and training agency mechanics for AVL hardware installation. This is for their benefit of understanding how and where the hardware is installed so that any new vehicles coming into the fleet can be equipped with the right hardware, or repairs could be performed on existing vehicles that have issues with that hardware. And under integration with other equipment, we have anticipating issues and challenges associated with integration between other equipment and the AVL system. Agencies, despite all the planning done, should try to anticipate unforeseen challenges related to integration and be prepared to work with system vendors and equipment manufacturers. Issues related to integration can be technical and institutional in nature, such as the exchange of proprietary technology or data between vendors involved in the project. And the last point here is communicating with bidders regarding anticipated challenges with system integration during procurement. Agencies can utilize an RFI process to gather responses and potential solutions from prospective bidders, and this can help provide the AVL vendor with an understanding of the amount of work required to perform that integration. Some additional implementation recommendations here related to vehicle-to-center communications. Evaluate cellular providers to maximize the coverage and supplement with other communications gaps to fill, or communications methods to fill those gaps. Cell networks we found are commonly used by DOTs through our surveys and through our in-person interviews. Where gaps do exist, some DOTs have used multiple cellular providers, where other agencies have utilized radio communications where cell coverage doesn't exist. And Washington State DOT is also noted here on the slide as a best practice for their use of a 700 megahertz radio to supplement their cell coverage where needed. Outreach and buy-in. Performing regular outreach to maintenance and field operations personnel. This is important given that field personnel are the frontline users of the system, including maintenance supervisors and snowplow operators. Many states noted the importance of identifying champions and or agency peers to communicate the needs and the purposes and benefits of an AVL system to field maintenance staff as an effective method of outreach. Given that those frontline users might be more receptive to listening to other field staff that they see on a regular basis than, say, central office staff, for example. Communicating and demonstrating the purpose of the system to snowplow operators to alleviate concerns. Agencies we interviewed noted that Big Brother concerns from drivers of being watched with this AVL technology have lessened over time as they realize that the system isn't being used for disciplinary purposes. Where those concerns do still exist, though, communication should focus on the positives of the system. For example, use of the AVL system to exonerate drivers from any public complaints of property damages that come up from using the system to show that those drivers were not there where they might have been where the public might have said that there was potential property damage. So that's an example of how the system could be used to exonerate drivers from certain issues. And the last one here is being prepared for dealing with winter maintenance cultural challenges. This is referring to some of the big brother concerns noted earlier and the overall trust of operators in the system. This is where it becomes important to identify the right people as champions to support the adoption of the system from field personnel through outreach, training, and communication. Recommendations with respect to training, we have up here: provide training to all levels of system users before, during, and after system implementation. The main reason here is that better quality data from the system comes from agencies that use the data for performance measures and system evaluation that I'll address later. This includes training for supervisors, drivers, mechanics, and administrative staff that use the central software. The more training that happens, especially during and after implementation, the more accustomed staff become with their involvement in the system and the better quality data that can come out of it. Require an AVL vendor to provide initial training to agency staff on system operations and maintenance. This training can be for agency mechanics on, say, the basic maintenance and installation of system hardware. It can be requested for drivers on how to interface, if needed, with the in-vehicle equipment and detecting any issues with system operations. And it can also be for maintenance supervisors on the AVL software interface, covering how to use that interface for viewing vehicles and their status, among other features. Communicate the benefits of the AVL GPS system operations as part of training to establish buy-in from system users. As noted earlier, for drivers, a benefit could be the exoneration from claims of vehicle or property damage. For an agency as a whole, the benefits can range from increasing public transparency through sharing vehicle locations. It can be improving material usage efficiency, and it can be from improving vehicle maintenance efficiency. Presenting these benefits up front to system users can help reduce any anxiety and thus increase the overall buy-in of the system, of the technology. Another point here is conducting recurring training to winter maintenance staff to improve an agency's ability to achieve operational objectives. Recurring training sessions during and after implementation can help gain, again, buy-in from the new staff that come into it on the overall value of the system, and is especially important for agencies that use AVL GPS system data for performance measures to evaluate the operational efficiency. And this is one of the best practices called out here on the slide related to the Wisconsin DOT. And the last point here is establishing a train-the-trainer program to help retain system knowledge within the agency. It's useful if an agency is considering utilizing agency staff to provide training to system users, and it can be requested of the selected vendor for training agency staff on operations and maintenance. With respect to data collection and utilization, the first point in our data collection, requiring an AVL vendor to make system data available to the agency. Multiple agencies noted the benefits of obtaining system data from the AVL vendor through an API provided by the vendor. This API allows for downloading and storing select portions of the raw vehicle data into an internal agency database, which can then be used in many ways. For one example, the latitude and longitude data gathered can actively be used to display snowplow vehicle locations on a public web page. In other cases, agencies can perform an internal backup of that raw data and do some further analysis on storm response and other evaluations. With respect to data accuracy, understanding the limitations on material usage data accuracy. This can vary depending on how an agency calculates material usage, but some of the challenges gathered through the interviews include, for one, an inaccuracy of GPS measurements. Washington State DOT had noted that their mileage estimates were based on GPS measurements from the AVL system, not necessarily the vehicle odometer. So an inaccuracy of the GPS measurements could in turn lead to an inaccuracy of material usage calculations. And the second is using the spreader or spinner controller. In colder weather climates, drivers, we gathered through the interviews, will often leave the vehicle auger spinning in spinning mode, regardless of whether or not the material is being applied from the truck. So that's just to keep the auger from freezing up. And so if the system software is reliant on that spreader controller to calculate material usage, the constant spinning can result in perhaps an over-reporting of the material usage. The last point here is staffing and resources for data management. Identifying agency staffing and resources needed to support management of the system prior to procurement. In a turnkey approach, as I noted earlier, the selected vendor is responsible for all management and making it available through web-based software, which might be desired if there's no challenges to working with IT departments, for example. Another approach could be to requesting that data through an API, as noted earlier, to internally develop a customized dashboard, for example, that presents data commonly requested by agency staff. So we have a couple screenshots here kind of showing what that might look like at the bottom here. So, with respect to data utilization, using real-time system data to make adjustments to resource allocations and maintenance strategies. Supervisors that were interviewed noted that their use of the AVL software to monitor maintenance operations in neighboring areas or districts. This allowed them to make more informed decisions and appropriate adjustments and strategies as they saw a storm coming, for example. So agencies that utilize maintenance decision and support software have a greater ability to see recommended treatments based on what the weather forecasts are, which also allows for an improved coordination across regions. And the other point here is integrating other road condition data with mobile observations from the AVL systems. Many Tier 2 and 3 level agencies integrate vehicle-based temperature sensors with their AVL systems. Integrating this data with ARWIS station data, for example, can further improve a situational awareness of weather conditions and, in turn, improve the overall winter maintenance operations. In another example, images from vehicle dash-mounted cameras could also be integrated with images from ARWIS station cameras or other locations to help an agency verify and confirm pavement conditions, which can also, in turn, help evaluate the appropriate winter maintenance strategies. And also, with respect to data utilization, establish a performance management program to document performance and benefits. This can help assess the operational performance and identify opportunities for improvement. Agencies can use those measures to demonstrate the benefits of the system to agency staff. You can also provide justifications to agency executives and legislators on how the benefits relate to the costs, which help sustain the ongoing operations and maintenance of an AVL program. Work with system vendors to develop desired data reporting features and performance dashboards. While many agencies interviewed noted their use of vendor software for data management and reporting, changes to those interfaces are sometimes desired. Most vendors have been willing to work with agencies to make those enhancements where needed to meet the agency needs. And last point here is using an internal resources to develop an agency dashboard for reporting features and performance measures. This is because agency staff oftentimes have a good understanding on the goals and objectives of an AVL program and might be more knowledgeable regarding the performance management needs of the agency. So agencies should carefully review these options, utilizing internal agency staff versus vendors to determine the best way to develop or enhance tools, software tools to meet their needs. And so some of these images on these slides illustrate what we gathered through some of the interviews we conducted. And the last set of recommendations here is related to data sharing and operations and maintenance. Under data sharing, considering sharing the vehicle location data with the general public. This can be shown through a breadcrumb trail, for example, in the images below here. There's a desktop version on the left and a mobile application version on the right. It's done to help increase the public transparency of snowplow operations to show how the agency is responding to snowstorms. This desire of transparency, though, also has to be balanced with, say, concerns about liability that departments may have with sharing vehicle locations. So internal discussions within the agency can help determine that best course of action there on whether or not to share vehicle location in this manner. And lastly, related to operations and maintenance, obtain support and secure funding to sustain ongoing operations and maintenance. Support from agency executives and management is is very important for securing funding for ongoing O&M. Understanding the staffing resources and costs required is also critical for ensuring the proper amount of support is in place for the system. So, as Ming noted, we did produce 6 separate case study reports for these states listed here on the slide, as well as a final research report that presents all of the material that Ming covered, as well as many of the recommendations that were presented here in the PowerPoint presentation today as well. And those final products will be put up onto the ClearRoads webpage at the link below later on after the completion here of this presentation. So with that, I think we are near the end here for questions at this point. So Greg, I'll turn it back to you, Greg, for if you wanted to raise any questions at this point.
That sounds good, Dan. Thank you. Just a reminder to everybody to, if you do have a question or comment, to enter it into the chat box. I will go back and say that we did have a few questions already entered in during the presentation, and one of them can be handled offline. Another one was answered by a fellow TAC member. Then we had a question from Cliff Spoonmore out of Wyoming. How long is the after system implementation training? Hopefully a morning type meeting in length. And we did have a response from Texas as to how long their training goes. It's more like a half day, but for more advanced training, it was 2 days. But I guess the question is more broad and especially related to the case study state. So how long is the after system implementation training generally?
After system implementation, so it could be scheduled at, at intervals, like say once a year is kind of what we were referring to, I think, in that case, Ming. So it could be a half a day training for example, for maintenance supervisors that utilize the central software to get data out of the system and produce performance reports. If you're using a vendor-based software package, there might be some updates that get developed by that vendor, and maybe they want to present that to you so that you can see what's there and be perhaps more efficient to getting the data you need out of the system. So that could be, say, a half-day training. Well, depending on how extensive the material is, it could be anywhere from a half-day to a full-day training. But
yeah, among the 6 states that we interviewed, and the length and frequency of the training vary by individual agencies. Mm-hmm. But what we found is that there's a common trend that obviously you want to conduct they all have a sort of annual training program. So each operator and supervisors are trained on an annual basis. The timing of such training is typically prior to the winter season, and it could be purposely set up, prepared AVL system training, or a lot of times it's actually combined with more general winter operations training, and could be a winter rodeo type of event, or it could be their any winter event exercise. And the length of the training, as Dan mentioned, a lot of them is more kind of half a day, but it ranges from half a day to a full day, and some of them provided more extensive training that, similar to Texas, covered 2 days.
Okay, thank you. Cliff Spoonmore out of Wyoming also has a question. He asks, how many states show the location of their plows in real time or delayed?
I cannot get on top of my head to give you the right number, but among the agencies we interviewed, 6 of them, I think 3 of them are showing the vehicle location on their website, either it's 511 or it's other winter observation website. And typically it's on a delay basis and not necessarily in real time, but it's near real time. Delay can be anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 minutes.
And that delay, I didn't mention it in my slides, but sometimes drivers will have a concern about, say, the real-time reporting of their vehicle location. So I think Utah was a state we interviewed that delayed the real-time reporting by, I think, 3 minutes of time. And that's just to alleviate driver concerns about, let's say, someone taking the real-time location and using that for a potential attack, for example, on a snowplow vehicle. I think that's done to help alleviate those driver concerns on sharing that vehicle location information. So.
Okay. We have a question from Patty Caswell out of Oregon. Her question is, were you able to obtain information about cost in terms of ongoing maintenance and program support? Not necessarily installation or obtaining the actual system, but maintenance of the system and the overall program, such as running statistics and reports.
Cost for ongoing operations and maintenance. I don't know that.
We, not through all the 6 agencies, we did collect some information on selected agencies in terms of their ongoing operations cost. Maintenance cost is a little bit tougher to get, and I will have to check to see the case study reports, because if we did collect such information, they are included in the individual case study report. And so within the case study report, there is a section talking about the cost for equipment and for installation. And whenever the information is made available to us, we also include the ongoing operations and maintenance. But from top of my head, I think this is top of it's kind of the information. Sometimes it's challenging for agencies to produce in such a short time frame and make it available to the research team.
We did include cellular costs, cellular vendor costs as part of that ongoing operations and maintenance, but that doesn't necessarily fall under running statistics and reports in that sense. Internal agency staff are often utilized for that, and I don't know if that cost is separated out from their other regular duties that they perform for the agency. So it's sort of a cost that, I guess, for running statistics and reports is almost kind of borne by the agency from their agency staff that are trained on how to use the system.
Okay, Scott Lucas from Ohio has asked, could you go back to slide 16? And then his question is, slide 16, 16. And then his question is, was the travel path of the snowplow tracked and stored for later reference? Maybe that's not slide 16.
Travel, like the route specifically you're talking about of a snowplow driver specifically. So they're just related to route optimization, perhaps, or.
Let me find Scott and unmute him really quick. Here we go. Scott, you're unmuted. If you want to follow up with that question, please.
Yeah, actually, I think it is slide 15. I think you just had it up for a second ago. And I guess my thing, I wasn't seeing anything about tracking, for data capture for like future reference where the plow has been. Where the snowplow truck has been in its travels. It seemed like it'd be something we store. I didn't know if anybody else doesn't store that, just not type of data captured.
That could be related to a breadcrumb trail, for example.
Well, some of those agencies, especially if they're using MDSS, it's kind of an embedded function, I believe, that they do store the data and which allow them to go back to play back each individual snowplow and which route they go through at which time, and then play out the whole event. And for those who are not on MDSS, and some of them do have that capability, they do store the data, but it's all down to the amount of data they would like to store and manage. But in general, I think most of the agencies we interview do store the data because they utilize that for further future analysis, whether it's for route planning, optimization, or investigating the system operation efficiency.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I had some more discussion between TAC members here, but I think the next question is from Joe Thompson. Did any discussions come to light regarding any of the Tier 3 surveys and using AVL as a performance measure for performance-based contracting, specifically for payment of a maintenance contract?
We did talk about the potential of moving the procurement method to the performance-based, and but that discussion I think was limited with Michigan DOT and possibly Nebraska DOT. And Nebraska was kind of at the beginning of their current contract, so that wasn't really something they think too hard about it. But Michigan, they indicate that they would like to, if possible, to in the next phase to move into more performance-based procurement. And but there are a lot of details that need to be worked out. And that's pretty much to the extent that we have collected so far. Did we, Dan? Is there anything you want to add?
No, I recall Michigan as a case where they worked with counties for winter maintenance. And I'm trying to remember the arrangement between MDOT and the different counties. I think MDOT covered state routes within certain counties, but other counties
take care of their state routes.
Other rural areas took care of their own state routes. So I think that was the only agency we interviewed that had that kind of arrangement.
So Patty Caswell follows up with a question. Do you have any recommendations for next steps for additional research or other?
Yes, there are a couple of predominant ones that after we complete the research, actually 3 of them. One is the related to the equipment integration. And as Dan alluded earlier, it could be challenging to work with proprietary information and vendors and try to integrate various type of controllers with AVL. And we know that Fair Roads did a study a couple of years ago and related to plug and play initiative. And some of the agencies that we interviewed indicated, it would be really nice to have some sort of standards or allow them to do plug and play. And I do think there's a value to further investigate in that area, although we also understand the challenges associated with that initiative because a lot of things are driven by manufacturers with their proprietary protocols and intellectual properties. So that's something, kind of the areas for further research we would offer. The second one is Dan mentioned about the data accuracy. And we know agencies went through the rigorous process to calibrate their spreaders and whatnot to make sure that the controllers is working to the optimum possibility to calculate and capture the material usage and the application rate. And however, as indicated that earlier, Dan mentioned about the data accuracy in terms of utilizing the data to come up with the material usage report. And that's still a really big challenge. And then I think some agencies get by and learn the system and that find the areas that they and methods to make adjustment and still was able to effectively use the information collected by the system to do material usage reporting. But they still present significant challenges to some agencies that kind of somewhat not meeting their expectation in terms of producing accurate data, allowing them to utilize the result directly for reporting purpose. So that's not necessarily related to the AVL system per se, but I think that's something, maybe the industry can look into ways to produce more accurate the data reporting feature, and QR roads can certainly play a big role in influencing the how manufacturers produce their product and influencing their practice as well. The last part is the connected vehicle implication, and I think all of you may have already started thinking about how connected vehicle technology may well impact how you perform winter maintenance activities. And I think that's really a big area, and the QR roads may want to consider and look into how does that going to impact future technology implementation and future operations, and what are the opportunities out there to leverage the current as well as upcoming connected vehicle technologies that may help agencies with the winter maintenance operations.
So a couple of our TAC members, Todd Miller from Missouri and Alan Johnson from Wisconsin, both think that a good follow-up is for this project is a more in-depth study of the return on investment or a cost benefit for AVL, so we can sell it to senior management. Just wanted to make that comment. David Gray from New Hampshire asked, was there any information obtained on states installing AVL on hired equipment and tracking their activities while they were under contract with the state?
I don't recall that.
Yeah. We, as part of the case studies, we didn't encounter any hired contractor for performing the winter operations for the state on state's behalf. But as Dan mentioned earlier, Michigan, as a state agency, they maintain about 1/3 of the state routes, and the rest of the state routes are taken care of by counties. And so MDOT, Michigan DOT, has an agreement with those county agencies. And then, however, I'm not quite sure about the arrangement in terms of making the purchase of the equipment or utilizing the MDOT's capability, or such as MDSs and other investment they have made. And however, Wisconsin, that's another story. That Wisconsin, and I always on the call, and Wisconsin doesn't own any snowplow vehicles. They provide funding for counties to perform snowplow and winter maintenance activities. And so all the snowplow equipment are owned maintained by the county, and with that provide the funding and also provide the procurement mechanism to help them and provide overall directions. And that's a kind of really a unique setting. They are not necessarily a hired contractor, but in a way they are acting as kind of independent agencies for the counties for doing their work, and then but utilizing the WSDOT resources and reporting to WSDOT on the snowplow activities and performance on state routes.
Okay, great. That's a good comment about Wisconsin too. I think that's the extent of our direct questions or comments to the research team. So as a reminder, we will be posting this recording. It's being recorded and it's being posted. It will be posted on the project page for this project, as well as those case study reports, which are currently on the members only side under research project documents. So they are up on the website. They're just not on the public facing side just yet, but they will be soon. So with that, I want to thank again the research team from AECOM. I want to thank the project subcommittee and the entire TAC for Clear Roads for participating and during this project and also during this final webinar. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and a great holiday weekend.